Welcome to another episode of Net Wins. 5 players the Hall of Fame hasn't gotten around to yet. The Naismith Basketball Hall of Fame inducts its class every September. The process is notoriously opaque, committee-driven, lobbying-dependent, and shaped as much by narrative as by numbers. Players who define their era sometimes wait decades, others slip through permanently. I ran every retired, non-active player in the Net Wins database through the composite ranking. The formula that weighs combined career net wins per season average and peak 3-season average equally. Then I filtered out everyone already inducted. 5 names came out at the top. None of them belongs in the category of snubbed great. They belong in the more interesting category of players whose contributions didn't fit the story the Hall needs to tell. Number 1, Shawn Marion, The Matrix. The formula's answer to who is the best non-Hall of Fame retired player is Shawn Marion, and the reason is straightforward once you see the numbers. Marion produced nearly 4 net wins per season across 11 years, a rate that matches or exceeds several players who are in the Hall, while doing it in a way that never produced a single statistical category that showed up on a highlight reel. Marion's peak was the 2004-2005 Phoenix Suns, the Steve Nash MVP season, the 7 seconds or less offense, the 62-win team that announced a new era of basketball. Nash won the MVP. Mike D'Antoni got the credit. Marion's contribution to that team by the net wins formula, 8.06, the highest individual single-season mark on the team, higher than Nash's own 7.44 that year. He did it by doing everything. Points off cuts and offensive rebounds, defensive versatility that let him cover positions 1 through 5 depending on the possession, steals, blocks, and rebounds in a volume that almost no small forward in the league matched. His career averages 15.2 points, 9.4 rebounds, 1.7 steals, 1.2 blocks are genuinely unusual. Only 4 players in NBA history averaged at least 15, 9, 1.5, and 1 for a career. 3 of them are in the Hall. The reason Marion isn't discussed as a Hall of Fame candidate comes down to aesthetics. His shooting form was famously strange, a flat push-shot jumper that analysts spent years questioning even as the shots went in at 47% from the field. He wasn't a lead scorer who could get his own shot in isolation. He wasn't a primary ball handler or a playmaker. On the 7-second Suns, he was the engine nobody talked about because Nash and Amare were the faces. When the Suns traded him to Miami in 2008 for Dwayne Wade, the narrative was that the Suns had moved on and Marion was completely a complimentary piece being swapped for a star. He then went to Dallas, won the 2011 NBA championship, and played well into his mid-30s, producing positive net wins on winning teams. A career that ran 11 seasons, peaked at one of the highest single-season marks for a forward in the 2000s, never had a year below 1.29, except one bad season on a 29-53 team, and ended with a championship ring. The Hall hasn't called. There's no obvious reason why. The second player is Shawn Kemp, the Rain Man. Shawn Kemp's case is different from Marion's, and the difference is honest. Marion never had an explanation for why he wasn't inducted. Kemp does. He battled substance abuse issues that disrupted his career and remained part of his public profile. The Hall is technically a merit-based institution, but it's a human institution too, and narrative matters. The formula doesn't weigh any of that. What it sees is this. For a 7-year stretch from 1992 to 97, Shawn Kemp was one of the most dominant power forwards in basketball. His peak 8.38 in 95-96 on the 64-win Supersonics is the highest single-season mark in this entire group and one of the highest ever recorded by a power forward in the database. Those 7 seasons from his 3rd year through age 27 produced a composite so strong that it still holds up across his full career, including the steep decline years in Cleveland. Even counting 1999-2000 season and the ghost of himself seasons that followed his move from Seattle, his career average of 3.63 net wins per season remains excellent. The Sonics teams he anchored went 55-27, 63-19, 64-18, 57-25 in consecutive seasons. His top 3 average of 7.35 is the second highest in this group and comparable to players already in the Hall. Gary Payton was the face of those teams. Kemp was the heartbeat. His career arc, explosive rise, dominant prime, and early decline is the template for how substance issues alter careers and legacies. Whether that's a Hall of Fame consideration is a judgment call the formula doesn't make. What I could say is that the basketball he played at his peak was Hall of Fame basketball. Player number 3 is Horace Grant, the Forgotten Bull. Horace Grant's composite rank is driven entirely by one number, his per season average of 4.63 net wins. That is the highest average among any player in this group, and it ranks him in the same territory as players like Clyde Drexler, Gary Payton, and Kevin McHale, all of whom are in the Hall. Grant played only 8 seasons in this database, which limits his career totals, but the quality of those 8 seasons is consistently elite. He was the best kept secret on a three-peat Bulls, a power forward who guarded the opposing team's best big, cleared the glass, ran the floor, and provided the defensive infrastructure that led Jordan and Pippen to play freely on the offensive end. His peak season, 91-92, on the 67-win Bulls produced 7.2 net wins. That is a Jordan-era Bulls season where Horace Grant outscored Pippen 6.08 and was within range of Jordan 7.87 by this formula. On one of the greatest teams in NBA history, Grant was essentially a co-equal to Scottie Pippen in terms of individual contribution to wins. He then left Chicago, joined Shaquille O'Neal in Orlando, and helped build the mid-90s Magic into a finals team. He later won a 4th championship with the 2000 Lakers, 4 rings across 3 franchises, the formula's highest per season average among all non-Hall of Fame candidates. The reason Grant isn't in the Hall is probably the simplest one. He was never the best player on any of his teams. Jordan was better. Pippen was more famous. Shaq was more dominant. O'Neal was more celebrated. Grant was always the 3rd or 4th name mentioned when people talked about those teams, and the Hall tends to induct the names people mention first. The 4th player on the list is Detlef Schrempf, the underrated pioneer. Schrempf has the highest combined net wins of any player in this group, 46.6, more than Marion, more than Kemp, more than Grant. The reason he ranks 4th rather than 1st is that his per season average at 3.35 is pulled down by early and late career seasons on below 500 teams, and the composite scoring penalizes that. But the career totals are real. 14 seasons, 3 Six-Man of the Year awards, the most ever, a perennial all-star in Indiana and Seattle, one of the first European players to become a consistent NBA starter and key piece on 2 Western Conference Finals teams. His 3 seasons with the 63-win Sonics, 64-win Sonics, and 57-win Sonics represent a 3-year peak of 7.32, 6.6, and 4.86 net wins respectively, the kind of sustained excellence that usually gets players inducted. The Schrempf case is partly about timing and partly about role. He came into the league as a bench player and spent years as a 6-man before becoming a full starter, which compressed the years during which he was accumulating the kind of star in the Hall rewards. And when he did become a star, he was doing it in Indiana before moving to Seattle. He is probably the most statistically overlooked players in 90s basketball. The formula puts him ahead of Allen Iverson, Tracy McGrady, Carmelo Anthony, and a long list of Hall of Famers by career combined net wins. He's never been a serious Hall of Fame finalist. And the last player on the list is Kevin Johnson, who was a point guard before the term existed. Kevin Johnson spent 11 seasons as the starting point guard for the Phoenix Suns and produced 42.6 regular season net wins, more than Steve Nash did in his first tenure in Phoenix, comparable to Jason Kidd in his prime, and ahead of multiple Hall of Fame point guards in total career value. His peak seasons, Phoenix 88-89 and 92-93 teams both produced 6.03 net wins and came with the Suns making deep playoff runs. KJ was one of the most explosive scoring point guards of the era, a legitimate top 5 player at his position for most of the early to mid-90s. The reason why he's not in the Hall is the same reason he's not in the public memory the same way Nash or Kidd are. He played most of his peak years before the internet made anything permanent in a market that had limited national television exposure on teams that got to the finals once but never won. He is also widely understood to have left the game early. He retired at 32 with considerable basketball still in him, due in part to chronic knee problems that already cost him multiple seasons. The Hall considers off-court factors. Johnson's career has been complicated by serious personal allegations that arose after his playing days and have affected his legacy. Whether those considerations belong in a basketball evaluation is a separate debate the formula doesn't enter. What the formula says, 11 seasons, 42.6 net wins, consistent elite performer through age 30, a 3-year peak comparable to anyone at the position in his era. The basketball record is Hall of Fame caliber. What these 5 players have in common is the Hall of Fame rewards a specific kind of greatness: volume scoring, MVP awards, finals appearances, and the ability to be the best player in a championship team. The 5 players have generally had one or two of these things, but not all of them. Marion was never a volume scorer. Kemp had his career interrupted. Grant was always the 3rd best player on the team. Schrempf came up as a role player before transitioning to star. Johnson played in an era before every moment was digitized. The net wins formula doesn't care about any of that. It measures one thing: how much did this player's statistical contributions convert into actual wins and losses relative to the team context they played in. By that measure, all 5 of these players performed at a level that would typically earn Hall of Fame consideration. The formula isn't arguing they were robbed. It's pointing out that the Hall uses a different set of criteria, and that those criteria have a systemic bias towards players who scored a lot and played on famous teams. Players who contributed broadly across multiple statistical categories, played excellent complementary roles, or had their careers cut short by injury or circumstance tend to accumulate exactly the kind of quiet excellence this formula is designed to find. The database is at willf123.github.io/NBA-net-wins. Every player, every season, every number behind this article.